Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I want to thank you for waiting a couple extra minutes as we got going here. I was gabbing and lost a little track of time, but thank you. Our program today is titled Grout Right Selection, Avoid Correction. Love the title. Again, right selection, avoid corrections. So I'm Jim Olson with the National Tile Contractors Association. I want to welcome you and thank you for attending today's program. I know you're taking time out of your busy schedule and we really appreciate it. And today's webinar is sponsored by Sika. Before I introduce today's speaker, I want to remind you that during the webinar, you'll be muted. Please use the questions area on your computer to type in your questions, and we'll answer those questions at the end of this presentation. If the audio on your computer is poor, call the number on the invite and listen on your phone. All NTCA webinars are available to watch at any time on the NTCA YouTube channel shortly after the webinars are presented. This gives you easy access to watch and or share all current and past programs at your convenience. All right, I'm happy to introduce today's presenter, Brett Mauney. He is a CTC, CTI. He's Sika's National Technical Manager for Sika Tile Solution Systems. Brett Mauney's career stretches back to 1988, working all sides of the tile industry to include ceramic tile and setting materials manufacturing, installation, sales, and distribution. Welcome, Brett. I'm sure we're going to have another great program from you. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Jim. All right, we're ready to get started here. So as Jim mentioned here, first and foremost, thanks, Jim, and thanks for having us, and thanks for everybody's time for being with us today. What we're going to be talking about today is grout, right selection avoids correction. And really within the agenda, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to talk about grout by the numbers, just a real quick kind of synopsis of where the industry is with grouts and by numbers. We're going to talk about the purposes, types of grout, what's new in the grout world, advantages of key grout products. We're going to hit on a couple of the specific ones within that category. And then also we're going to talk about common challenges, solutions, and tips. And then of course we're going to finish with questions and answers. And as Jim mentioned earlier, if you got any questions, put them up in the chat bar, and we'll get to those at the very, very end of this. But hang tight, and we're going to run through this. So grout by numbers. Grout products represent approximately 20 to 25% of core tile and stone installation market. So what we're trying to show here is kind of the amount of grout that's being used, or how important grout is to the installation. And you're going to see that throughout this entire presentation, the importance of grout. We think of it as something as it's just a grout, but unfortunately, as a manufacturer, it's the only thing that we make that the end user sees. So we as manufacturers try to make it the best that we can. Approximately 50 to 60% of the market size consists of standard, sanded, and unsanded cementitious grouts. So approximately 50 to 60% of the market size is a standard grouts. We're starting to see a rise though in the high performance grouts, which is really where we're going to hit that high performance, ready to use grouts are going to be some key topics within today's presentation. But we've got high performance grouts, the 118.7s, we got the 118.3, the epoxies, which we'll touch just a little bit on, and the 118.19 ready to use premix grouts, which we're really going to dive into that because that's a new ANSI specification as of 2024. We got grout products, or grout products drive architectural specifications and builder selections, typically due to color. And how many times have we been sitting with somebody and they want this color grout, and if an architect specifies this particular color from a manufacturer, traditionally what happens is all the other products for that tile installation are also going along with that manufacturer, not only for system warranties, but also because of just ease of, hey, if it's going to be Sika tile grout, we're going to use Sika tile on all the rest of the project. So that architectural specification really does drive because of the color they're choosing. But not only that, it's also because of what that grout can do. So here's an interesting one. I've done some math for us. Due to less volume of grout per job, the market is moving towards a higher performing and higher price grouts to avoid callbacks. And that's kind of what this whole presentation is. Let's learn about how to avoid callbacks or eliminate or reduce callbacks and go through some everyday techniques that we should be following for proper grout installations. So we're going to dive into that, but I do want to say here, over here, if you see a picture of the products right below it, this is something that's so true. I've seen it myself. This is a quote from a personal friend of mine that works in a showroom, but it's, I've seen designers and homeowners spending hours choosing the right grout color when it only took them 10 minutes to pick the actual tile. So we've seen that, and sometimes it's reversing that, but we see a lot of times where they'll pick a tile pretty easily, but now it's down to choosing the appropriate grout or color grout that they want for that installation. So let's move forward. So the purpose of a grout. What is the true purpose of a grout other than just its grout, its appearance? It falls into the grout joint. Well, first and foremost, it is appearance. People are choosing a grout color or tile or grout finish to achieve a look. So they're either choosing a contrasting color to really make that tile kind of pop, or they're going more with a complementary color to give it more of a monolithic finish and appearance. So grout does play a big role, and the color of grout plays a big role in the appearance of it. The other end there is hygienic. I don't think a lot of people think about this. Grout is hygienic in the sense that we've had instances where people want to take tile or a natural stone, because that's where we've seen it the most, and do no grout joints, just butt it up. Well, first and foremost, if you get grout, or I'm sorry, if you get particles, contaminants, food, any type of things into those grout joints, what's going to happen is it's going to cause mold, mildew, and cause some allergy, some hygienic issues. So grout not only is for appearance, but it's also for hygienic purposes as well. And then of course we've got protection in there. And having a full grout joint, it's protecting the edges of those tiles, it's protecting the cushion edge of that tile, or the thermal expansion contraction, those tiles butting up against each other, or if there's no grout or a low grout in that grout joint, things hitting the edge of that tile and chipping it where that glaze meets the bisque of the tile. So there's three things in there. There's appearance, there's hygienic, and protection. And then the 2 and 3, really a lot of people don't realize that, but grout serves a bigger purpose other than just appearance. So purpose of a grout. Other than tile and stone itself, grout is the most visible part of the installation. As I said a few minutes ago, as a manufacturer, it's the only thing that we make that the end user sees. Everything else is under the installation. So when we're talking about grouts, we're talking about key performance characteristics. So what are those key performance characteristics? What are we looking for? We're looking for color consistency. Nobody wants a shaded, blotchy job. Nobody wants to see a light brown in one area, dark brown in the other, and a medium brown in the other, because it's all the same grout, but it's not consistent. So we're looking for color consistency. Hardness and durability. We want hardness. We want durability. We want that grout to last the lifetime of the tile, and it can be done. But it also takes some things that we're going to be talking about here in the future of this presentation. What can that hardness and durability achieve? What does it do for us? And then there's stain resistance. What does everybody complain about? I love my tile, but my grout looks blah. My grout doesn't look good. So we want to create grouts or work characteristics in looking at grouts that are stain resistance. So those are some of the key performance characteristics. And of course, no efflorescence. We don't want efflorescence. I know certain parts of the states, efflorescence is more common than it is in certain parts or certain types of installations over mud beds. Exterior applications are experiencing efflorescence. We want our products to resist efflorescence or no efflorescence, depending on what the product is. And we'll talk about those in just a little bit. Important contractor characteristics. So what's a contractor looking for? Contractor, first and foremost, they want familiarity. They want to be able to use a product day in, day out from one manufacturer or the same manufacturer that has those characteristics of easy to use, it's reliable, the feel and the handling, it's easy to clean up, the availability of the product, being able to go to a distributor and get that particular product. So, the contractors are looking for those things, and sometimes changing the mind from a contractor from one product to another can be very difficult because of the familiarity of it, is because they know how to mix it, they know the water ratio, they know the drying time, the cure time, the when I can clean it up time, and all of those things. And then, of course, the key architectural needs are color selection. Typically, that's the first and foremost. They've got this tile, they want the grout to be this color because they either want a contrast or they want something to complement. So color selection is first and foremost, but also too, they're looking at key properties, specifications, and those key properties are, example, stain resistance, the no efflorescence, chemical resistance, being able to withstand certain contaminants they're going to get on that floor, which we'll talk about some of those a little later on in the presentation. So those are some purposes of grout. Now let's talk about the key types of grout. So the key types of grout typically out there are standard cement grouts, high performance grouts, epoxy grouts, and ready to use grouts. And a lot of these ANSI designations are defined in the TCD handbook or in the American National Standard specification for ceramic tile, installation of ceramic tile. In a lot of these ANSI specifications, you can really dig into and look at the testing standards, but we're going to talk about these individually here. So when we talk about key types of grout, first and foremost, the one that's the most used, the one that's out there every day is 118.6 standard cement grouts. I'm not going to read that first bullet point, but basically that's just telling us that it's a manufacturer prepared product. Kind of tells you a little bit what's involved in it, in the ingredients in it, and it produces a water resistant, dense, uniformly colored material. But foremost, these are more economic grouts that are out there. And so with that being said, these are typically your sanded and unsanded grouts. They're going to have the sanded grouts are going to be the 1/8 inch to 1/2 inch joints, and the unsanded grouts are that 1/16 inch to 1/8 inch grout joints. What is the big difference between the two? I always tell people it's in the name. One is sand, one has an aggregate to it, and one does not. And that aggregate's purpose is to fill a larger void, to keep something from possibly shrinking, which we're going to talk about shrinking here in a little bit. But 1/16 inch to 1/8 inch unsanded, 1/8 inch to 1/2 inch sanded. These are standard performance levels for compressive and flexural strengths, water absorption, and shrinkage. I want you to remember those words in this bullet point of standard performance because we're about to jump up to something here. 118.7, high performance, not a standard, a high performance. This is where we're starting to see the industry start moving towards these high performance grouts. So factory prepared mixture that is polymer modified and cement based. It produces a hard, dense joint that resists shrinking, cracking, and wear. It's a finer sand to combine usage of sanded and unsanded grouts. So in the same product, you're able to do that 1/16 inch to 1/2 inch grout joints. This is the scary part. People see where it says here faster setting. When we say faster setting, that's really done with a lot of the raw materials that are in it. It's a faster setting product, still not so fast that you can't get on it and clean it. We as manufacturers, for example, with the 815 Secure Grout, we make this product to where it is faster setting, but it is still easy to clean up. So faster setting means we can get on the job quicker. We can get into the cleanup phase of it quicker without having to hurt that grout by getting on it too soon. Then, of course, these products typically resist efflorescence, and that resisting efflorescence is typically due to the raw materials that are in this product. So they're going to resist that efflorescence on top, which again, we'll talk about efflorescence and how to avoid it here in just a little bit. These are high performance levels for compressive and flexural strengths, water absorption, and shrinkage. In a little bit, you're going to see a slide. I'm going to show you a chart, kind of what the ANSI designation of this product is trying to tell us it needs to achieve to be considered the high performance 118.7 grout. So it's added performance level for stain resistance, color consistency, hardness, and durability. That hardness and durability, the denseness of the product, help resist that stain. In most cases, these products are going to resist water-based types of fluids that get on top of it. They're color consistent. meaning that with the raw materials, we're able to control that color consistency. Being that is a little bit faster drying and it's made to be that way, we're able to control that color a lot better than we could with a traditional 118.6 grout. So another type of grout, and these key types of grouts, is epoxy grouts, 118.3. We won't dive into these too much. They're epoxy grouts. People hear the words epoxy and they get scared. A 118 epoxy grout is a full 100% modified epoxy grout. Typically, it consists of a resin, a hardener, and a filler. That filler is typically going to be a sand or a quartz or some type of color. That's typically the color for these applications, but they're chemical resistant, and that's where you're seeing these typically used in chemical resistant areas, areas where they need to have a grout that's not going to deteriorate over time because of the cleaners or because of the contaminants are getting down on that floor. For example, restaurant kitchens. These grouts can typically do up to a 1/2 inch in grout joint. So it's a product that's going to be able to do that 1/16 up to 1/2 inch grout joint. They're high performance level for stain resistance because of that chemical resistance part of these, the color consistency, the hardness, and durability. Now, I know when I started in the industry back in the late 80s, epoxy grouts were some of the most difficult things to use. I recommend, if you haven't tried an epoxy grout lately, try one. They're so much easier to use. We built surfactants into our product, so that way it just makes it easier to clean. Surfactant's a fancy word for soap. So it just makes it easier to clean, easier to use. They're not as caustic as they used to be, but they're still giving that great performance that they're known for. Also with the epoxy grouts, with the changes over the years, an epoxy is in a sense a plastic. When it dries, it's a hard plastic. But what you're getting with these is more of a matte finish instead of a sheen to it. Again, when you get that grout joint that looks like a plastic inside there, has a sheen to it, but yet the tile doesn't, it's not going to look good. A lot of the epoxies nowadays are kind of a matte finish or even look like just a regular traditional sanded grout. So next in the epoxy kind of category is 118.8s, and those are epoxy emulsions. I call them modified epoxies. Those are typically you're taking your hardener and your resin and you're mixing them with a bag of grout, for example. Good still chemical resistance. They just don't have as much chemical resistance as a true 118.3 would. And then you've got the 118.5s. We're only going to talk about this for about 5 seconds. These are furan grouts. Difficult to use, but they still are spec'd in a lot of cases for, let's say, bottling plants, soda bottling plants, dairy farms, because they are so impact resistant as well as the chemical resistance and stain resistance to those products. So that's epoxies. So now, key types of grouts. ANSI 118.19. Organic premix grouts. This is a new designation. We're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes, a little bit more, but this is our ready-to-use grouts. I am going to read this word for word. A ready-to-use factory-prepared mixture of water, polymers, aggregates, pigments, and other materials to produce a water-resistant, stain-resistant, and uniformly colored material. So what it's telling us, in a sense, is this is a bucket of material that's ready to go. It's factory-prepared. Open the lid and use it and go. So what this has here, these particular products, they're finer sand to work as both sanded and unsanded. So again, this product can go from that 1/16 inch up to 1/2 inch grout joint. They're water-based, higher performance levels for stain resistance. These products don't need to be sealed. They're ready to go. Once it's dry, cured, never have to seal that product again. Color consistent, hardness, and durable. We're going to talk about those with the ANSI specification in a moment. Premix, ready to use right out of the bucket, and reusable. I'm going to hit the reusable point because I think it's a pretty cool concept. Is, for example, our Ultima grout here. You pop the lid off, you're going to see a little clear piece of plastic. Take the plastic out. Use the grout. Let's say you're doing a shower backsplash. You're not able to complete it. It's the end of the day. You need to come back the next day or the next day after that or up to 30 days. You can take that little piece of plastic that we took out and saved, put it back inside, put the lid on top of it, make sure it's secured, stored in an area where the temperature is not rising up and down, and you can reuse that grout up for 30 days. Now, that's pretty cool in my opinion, that I don't have to mix anything. It's really easy to use. We're going to dive into that here in just a moment right here. So what's new in the world of Grout. This new ANSI 118.19 is a new designation as of 2024. So with that being said, even though the ANSI testing is new, or ANSI requirements is new, although ready-to-use grouts have been around for several years, we now have an ANSI test method to classify and measure the products. So these products have really changed over the years, and these ready-to-use grouts are growing every day. They're no longer DIY products. They're professional grade products that can be used in residential and some light commercial applications. I know of a certain fast food restaurant that uses ready-to-use grout, these premix grouts, in their dining area because they can withstand that light commercial application. So they're great products, much easier to use from the original urethane based. So they went from urethane based ready to uses to the newer acrylic bases. The urethanes, if you ever use those, they were hard to smear. You kind of had to be a Popeye there to get it into the joints. They left a haze. They were just a lot more difficult. They still gave a lot of the attributes that we're looking for, but they were just more difficult to use. The acrylic-based products are much easier to use in the application, and the attributes just keep growing and growing. So with a full color line, these products can be on your next job. You're going to start seeing more ready-to-use grouts out there that can tackle these everyday installations and just make life easier. And again, we want to avoid callbacks. We want to avoid going back out to that job. So with this ANSI designation of the 118.19, here's kind of what we're looking at, and I'll do this a little bit here in the sense I'm not going to hit everything on the testing here, but indentation resistance. So indentation resistance, that is 1,000 PSI or greater. So basically what that's meaning is that point load or that high heel that hitting on that indentation or creating indentation in that grout. It's not so soft. It's hard enough to resist that up to 1,000 pounds PSI. Abrasion resistance, that's 500 or less cube. Abrasion resistance with that cleaning, with the everyday wear, making sure that the product's not going to wear out of the grout joints. Resistance to grout mold is a 0. Water cleanability, it's got to be able to be cleaned with water, free of visible haze, lumps, or dry materials. And then chemical resistance, no deterioration or indentation resistance of greater than 500 PSI. So there's a chemical resistance to it. That's why it doesn't need to be sealed. But again, these products are great because in this one type of product, you're going to be going from a 1/16 inch up to a 1/2 inch in most cases. They're color controlled. With our particular product, the Ultimate Grout, we use where the color is actually in the quartz. It's not a pigmented product. So you can't mess the product up. You can't pull the color out of the product as you're cleaning it. They're pre-mixed, ready to use. There's no sealer required. Excellent stain resistance, no efflorescence, crack resistance. When we say crack resistance, these products, unlike a cementitious material, have a little bit of flexibility to them. So they're not made so that you can go over a floor that has deflection, or made to withstand, or say, okay, I've got cracks in my slab, I'm not going to use a membrane, I'm going to use a ready-to-use grout, because that doesn't protect your tile itself. But they're still a crack-resistant product, and again, they're reusable. Take that little plastic piece out for ours, put it off to the side, use it, put it back, put the lid on it, and you're ready to go. But one of the things that's really unique with these, and I mentioned in that color controls bullet point, is my counterpart, John, out of Florida, he does this little testing or kind of this little show and tell when he's doing demos with the product, where he takes a big clump of it, no matter what color, we'll say it's the black sapphire, puts it into a clear cup of water and stirs it around. The water doesn't change color. It actually gets a little milky because of the acrylics, but it actually doesn't turn the color of whatever that grout is that he's got in there, versus if you were to do that with a Portland cement pigmented product. So some of the products out there are pigmented, some are not. This is controlled in the color within the quartz, so it's impossible to wash the color out of this particular product. So advantages of key grout products. So let's talk about some advantages. So ANSI 182.7 high performance. We're going to go through these bullet points and talk about the advantage of these products. So high performance grouts are not new, but continually evolving and growing in usage. So you're starting to see more and more usage, which we'll talk about that here in a couple of bullet points. Grouts are traditionally chosen by color to either match the tile being installed or to make a statement. So again, that's that first selection. I pick this tile, I want this color grout. Well, one of the things that's being overlooked is the performance of that grout. So if it is, we'll go back to that commercial kitchen or that, dining restaurant kitchen where they pick a color grout, but not only is the color going to look great, but we've got to have a grout that's going to withstand the abuse that it's going to get in that application. I use the example too here. I live just outside of Chicago in the winter times. We salt the living fire out of our sidewalks and streets. I've walked in on many jobs, hotels in the city, downtown, where that salt gets dragged in to that front entryway, and that salt that we're using to keep from slipping is destroying our grout. So not only color is important, but it's also the performance, the characteristics of what that grout can withstand. These are higher performance grouts. They're ANSI 118.7. They can reduce grout headaches by eliminating callbacks. That's what we want to do. We want to eliminate the callbacks. I've always asked installers when I'm doing trainings that kind of, when we do trainings, we do them per industry standards or requirements. And, as much as wiping down the surface, keying in the mortar, directional troweling, and I get contractors will say, yeah, I don't get paid enough to do that, or that takes too much time. My question I always ask back is, well, raise your hand if you like to go back to your jobs and not get paid. So normally nobody ever raises their hand. So grout comes into that category, is choosing that right grout. So these 118.7s, high performance grouts are resistant to staining due to the density, resistance to efflorescence, and are color consistent. So great grouts, you're starting to see more and more of those. And if you look at here, I've got done some math on the side here. So back when 12 by 12 tiles and a 1/4 grout joints were common. Okay, so when I started in the late 80s, 12 by 12 was actually a large tile. It was 8 by 8s that were very common, but we're going 12 by 12 1/4 grout joints. If you were to take 1,000 square foot of a 12 by 12 tile with a 1/4 grout joint, roughly we're using roughly 6 25-pound bags of grout. Okay, we're now moving into larger tiles with smaller grout joints. If you were to say what's commonly popular right now, 12 by 24. So we have 1,000 square foot of a 12 by 24 tile with a 3/16 inch grout joint. We're down to 3 bags. That's half the amount from that original. And then now let's go even bigger, 1,000 square foot of a 24 by 36. So we're getting into larger tiles. People want larger tiles, smaller grout joints. So with that being said, we're down to 2 bags of grout. So with that, your material savings net are going to be far better or equal to what it was years ago with 12 by 12 tiles. So we're seeing the people that say, I don't want to spend the money on that type of grout, prior to now saying, well, we don't need it. It's not really changing the dollar of value that's going into the job and the labor and the materials. It's just adding to the benefits of that job. So keep that in mind. So why not go with the industry's best options? And those are going to be those higher performance grouts. We really want to see that. We really want to see, as not only a manufacturer, but as end users, the better grout being used on these jobs and applications to help reduce callbacks. So when we look at high performance grouts, ANSI 118.7 designation. So what does this tell us? If we look at this graph, we're going to skip some of these, linear shrinkage, but what I really want you to see is water absorption. If you look at that water absorption, the test duration and conditions is 50% relative humidity to immersion. So with that being said, this grout has to have less than 5% absorption in the sanded or unsanded. So there's still some absorption there, but with a higher performance, more denser product, it is down to less than 5%. Those 118.6 grouts are going to be at a higher absorption. Compressive strength. This is a really impressive number. Compressive strength after 28 days, it needs to meet 3,000 PSI minimum. That's a pretty darn durable grout right there. And that's how we help resist staining or keep that color consistency and resist efflorescence. Tensile strength, 500 PSI minimum. Flexible strength, 1,000 PSI minimum. So as you can see here, this testing for this product is, let's just say it's a hard test to pass to be able to meet this high performance grout. And when you can meet that and you know that you've got this information behind it or this quantification of this product behind it to get to that 187 high performance that you're getting a good grout from these manufacturers. So with that being said, 187 grout, you're going to be spending a little bit more money for it. But as I talked about just a few minutes ago with our tile size, grout joint size, and the amount usage, is you're seeing less grout used on the job. So the net is actually going to be equal to or better. So common challenges and solutions and tips. So this is where we get into a lot of these. And these are all pictures here that show what we've seen out on the jobs or when we're walking around. I will say this, my entire family is in the tile business, and we walk with our heads down and have some really interesting conversations picking apart jobs that we see out there and trying to figure out why something happened. And that's hopefully what we're going to talk about right now. So grout is the clearest indicator of how an installation was done or maintained. So when we talk about that, grout can be a sign of loose tiles. It can be a sign of overwashing, underwatering, or overwatering, cleaning methods, all kinds of things. So let's look at some common issues and prevention. So correct grout. Got some pictures here. We're going to hit on those pictures here in just a moment, but cracked grout is probably what we see the majority of the time that we're out walking around, and what the customers or your customers might see if something goes wrong. Cracked grout joints that run parallel to the tile or across the joint from edge to edge. So those are the typical two types of grouts. I can tell you when you've got a grout that cracks from edge to edge, so it's between the tiles, kind of going from one tile to the other, that's typically a shrinkage grout. And that typically means that your grout was mixed too wet, you got on it too soon, added too much water in your cleanup, or you used the wrong grout. So you maybe used a unsanded grout in a 3/16 inch grout joint, and that grout is not made to withstand that width of a grout joint, so it shrank. Hence, the sanded grout would have been the proper choice for that. But if we go through the bullet points here and look at it for prevention, so how do we create or how do we keep from these grouts from cracking? So first and foremost, make sure tiles are well bonded and proper expansion joints are used according to EJ 171. That's probably one of the biggest ones that we see out there. We see people that hard grout the installations in, not following perimeter soft joints, or joints, the soft joints that carry through the tile installation. Not only do we get cracked grout joints, we get cracked tile, but we need to follow those in accordance to that. If you look at these pictures here, both of these pictures are actually change of plane pictures. They're inside corners. One's on a floor to a wall, the other one's a wall to wall. You can see what was done wrong here. They hard grouted into it. They didn't do or follow the EJ 171 preparation for this backer rod, leaving that joint free, using a sealant to allow that thermal expansion contraction. In turn, this is what you end up with. In turn, you get a callback. And so that's what we're trying to eliminate, is those callbacks by following the proper rules to EJ 171 and making sure those tiles are well bonded. Over wood substrates, we want to ensure needed deflection values are met before installing the tile and grout. I call it twinkle toes. In my installation days, we'd walk in on a wood substrate, we'd bounce up and down, we'd kind of feel that floor to feel if we're getting any type of movement. I know that's not the true way of measuring it, but it's the first indication that we can actually check to see, is there deflection in this floor? So we want to make sure there's no deflection. We can make thin set bend or our adhesives bend. We can make our grout bend a little, but the one thing we cannot make bend is tile. So what ends up happening is your tile ends up popping, or you get, at the very least, cracked grout joints. So we want to make sure the deflection values are met prior to the installation. Mix grout to manufacturer's instructions, carefully measure water, and mixing at low speeds. We're going to talk about the low speeds here in just a little bit with some other prevention things. And you're going to start seeing some of these bullet points repeat themselves in some of these categories that we're going through. So we want to make sure we mix it to the manufacturer's instructions. We've had, or I've seen guys out on the jobs, myself included, some of my guys over the years where they've taken grout, they put their hose over the bucket. They say, okay, that's roughly 4 quarts, and they throw their bag in it and they mix it. But one of the examples I've always used with this is I take 2 clear glasses, fill them both with coffee, and in one glass I add a little more water, and then the other one a little less water. And what do I end up with? A for the most part, 2 different colors, but also 2 is I've diluted the taste of that coffee. We've diluted, when you overwater, the taste of the mortar. Not that we're tasting it, but we're spreading out the cement matrix. We're spreading out the pigments. So we're not going to get the true color. We're going to get a weaker product. It's not going to have the PSI strength. So we want to measure water always when we're mixing grouts. Wait for manufacturer's recommended time to clean. That's a big one. That is, I ask guys all the time when I'm doing classes or we do a grout demonstration, and I'll go around and I'll ask each individual person, how long do you wait before you clean up this grout now? I'll get 5 minutes, I'll get immediately, I'll get 15 minutes, 45 minutes. I get numbers all over the place. And one that I always tend to get to is when it hazes over. I will tell you this. Years ago, when the majority of tile being installed was either a clay base or a red body clay base, they were more absorbent and they would be pulling water in through that freshly grouted joint to help it start that drying process as well as the evaporation. So waiting for a haze, to haze, was kind of a good indication, but not anymore with tile being, I'd say 85% or better of the tile installations being done are with porcelain tiles. So a porcelain being that's impervious, which is 0.05 or less absorption rate, you now don't have that absorption of the moisture that's or water that's in the grout to help it dry and start to cure out. You're only relying on evaporation. So what happens is if it hazes over, you could still be getting on it too soon. So the real indication of when to clean that grout is actually when I can touch my finger to it firmly, pick it up and look and see that there's no transfer. That is when it's telling you now it's time to clean. If I get on it too soon, I'm going to cause some problems, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So do not clean tool with excessive amounts of water. We don't want to add too much water to that installation. It's what I call a dry wet sponge. Tool our joints with as little water as possible. Wipe it up with as little water as possible. Don't keep introducing water or more water to that fresh grout. And in some cases, a crack isolation membrane may be required. So that cracked grout joint may be because there's a crack in the substrate that's telegraphing through right there at that cracked joint. So these are some key things to look at for prevention of cracked grout joint. So let's move to the next. Inconsistent color. This is another one that we see out there quite often. So it's grout that is not uniform in color, showing light and dark areas. These are great pictures here of showing that. The difference in the shading, the high lights, darks, and all this. How do we help prevent that? First and foremost, one of those ways to prevent that, it's not in my bullet points, is you can move towards that 118.7 or that ready-to-use grout or the epoxy grouts. These grouts are known to hold that color consistency. But for prevention, pack grout joints fully. So we want to make sure they're packed fully. We want to make sure that grout joint is as full as it can possibly be. There's no hollow spots or voids underneath it. How do we know when we're grouting if we've got a full grout joint? It's not like you can see through the grout. There's a real easy indication. When you take your grout flow and you're smearing it across that grout joint, pushing down into the joint, the material, it's actually going to speed bump on you. That's what I call it. You'll see this little hump up of the grout because it can't go any further, so it actually pushes back up when you come over with the float. That's one way to tell that you've got a full joint. Another thing in here for prevention is allow 2/3 of the tile thickness to be open for grout, meaning that I don't want a bunch of thin set or mortar or other stuff inside my grout joint before I go grout. We as manufacturers try to make our grouts dry evenly, dry at a consistent rate. But when we've got a grout joint that's got highs, lows, highs, lows, 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 highs in it, what's going to end up happening is a high spot, that area of the grout's going to dry faster, the low spot's going to dry a little slower. That could cause shading in that grout joint for where you've seen it. I've had instances where I've been able to actually ask the contractor, you know, hey, hand me the trowel that you used to install this tile. I set it right next to the grout joint and I can actually see light, dark, light, dark, light, dark that actually matches the tooth of the trowel because that grout joint wasn't cleaned out well enough. Another one in here, it's a repeat. Mix grout to manufacturer's instructions, carefully measure water, and mix at low speeds. Wait for manufacturer recommendations times to clean. Now there's going to be certain products out there that are going to tell you you need to wait this long before you clean it. Other ones are going to tell you clean it up when firm to the touch, doesn't transfer the finger. So really follow those manufacturer's cleaning times for that particular product that you're using. Then do not clean tool with excessive amounts of water. So that's again coming back up there as a repeat. We don't want to add water, additional water to these products when it doesn't need to be used. So inconsistent color. Let's move to the next one, efflorescence. Certain markets in the United States, this can be a big deal. Certain areas, maybe not so big of a deal, but it is still something out there that we do see. And that efflorescence is a whitish powder or crusty crystalline deposit on the joint or along the edge of the tile, mainly seen on exterior applications or over mortar beds. Now, I put in the over mortar beds simply because efflorescence, we're used to see them outside on brick installations, on the brick veneer of a job. We do see them in some shower instances. Most of the times when we do see them in a shower, it's over a mud bed. I've got pictures and results of where a pebble stone was installed over a mud bed in a shower and nothing was cured out. It's constantly wet. That grout that they used was a standard grout in a case where it wasn't resisting some efflorescence, but it can only resist so much to where you were getting this white film on all the grout joints in certain areas of that shower. So it's not only an area of just mortar beds, exterior applications, but it also can be over mortar beds or floats, mud beds, whatever term you want to use on that. So how do we prevent this? We want to allow mortar beds to properly cure before grouting. So if we mud a bed or float a bed or a mortar bed, we want it to cure before we start grouting, because a lot of times let's say we've got a 3-inch down to 1-inch mortar bed, or it's even if it's just a flat 3-inch thick mortar bed, it dries enough for us to walk on it. We install our tile on top of it. We're encapsulating a lot of moisture. That moisture is still going to need to cure out. What ends up happening, just because we can walk on the tile, we come in, we grout it, and now that moisture is now filtering through the grout joints. And that grout joint is going to leave that deposit of that kind of white powder on top of it. Now, here's the fun thing on it. There's 2 ways of really telling if it's efflorescence. One way is pretty easy. Well, actually, they're both fairly easy. If you take a little bit of water, put it on it, and it looks like it dissolves away or goes away, it's probably going to be an efflorescence. Another way of doing it is you can take it, rub your finger on it, touch it to your tongue. If it tastes salty, it's efflorescence. If it doesn't taste salty, I'm going to say, didn't your mama ever warn you not to put things in your mouth that you don't know what they are? Those are some ways to tell if it's efflorescence. Another one in here is a vapor mitigation system may be required. So in some cases, that RH level in that substrate or where that moisture is coming up, your calcium chloride test, your pounds per 1,000 are high, it might require a vapor mitigation system, which is going to stop that moisture from coming up through that installation. High performance grouts, as we talked about earlier with the 118.7s, are going to resist those efflorescence. So it's just the product itself that can actually help resist it. Make sure grout joints are full and compact. We want to make sure they're full. We want to make sure they're compact and have that dense grout in there and occupying all areas of the joint and without cavities. So these are some ways to help avoid efflorescence. So next thing here, common challenges, solutions, and tips again for latex migration. So latex migration, I don't know if everybody's seen it or not, but it's out there. It's a white rubbery substance coming through the joints, mainly in submerged applications or high use moisture areas. You can see my picture there. It looks like a pigeon flew by and left his dinner, but it's really a migration of latex coming up through there. It's kind of a rubbery feeling. I wouldn't recommend licking it or touching it and putting it to your tongue. It's not going to dissolve the water, but basically what this is it's the acrylics or the latexes that are in the products that are leaching through. And a lot of times this is caused because there's too much latex, and let's talk about these preventions. So allow mortar and grout to completely cure before submersing. That's a big one. When you're doing pool applications, fountain applications, where there's tile or a waterfall type of installation from, let's say, a sauna going down into a pool, is we're going to get they'll install the tile, they want to put the water on it and have that water running through it. What's going to happen is it's not curing out properly. That water is going to get behind it and come out and start pushing the latex or the latex that's in the installation out to the surface, causing this unsightly rubbery white stuff on the part of it. So we need to make sure, again, whatever's on top of it, our mortars, our grouts are completely cured. In most cases, that's 28 days prior to submersion. only use manufacturer recommended mixture of water and water latex when mixing. You don't want to add latex, additional latex to products that don't need it. For example, with your mortars, most mortars out there are modified mortars. If you start adding latex to them, you're going to flatten the cake, as I say. If a cake calls for 3 eggs and you decide to add 4 eggs, that cake's not going to taste the same or even look the same. You're adding things that don't need to be there. What ends up happening is that latex, that excessive latex, will leach out to the surface, causing those unsightly white blemishes. So that's latex migration. Again, we see it not as often as efflorescence. Sometimes the two are mixed up between each other, but it is still a thing that's out in the industry that we do see. So low joints. Talking about low joints. Low joints are not completely full or sit below the tile edge. If you look at these two pictures here, we've got the picture of what I call a kind of a micro bevel or a little beveled edge, and that grout sitting well below that, even that bevel part. And then if you look at the stone that's on the top, you can really see that it's low. Now, I talked earlier about hygiene or grouts being hygienic. If I've got low grout joints, even though I've got grout in it, and I go to sweep, and I'm sweeping debris, food, other things are getting caught inside those grout joints, they're going to cause problems, allergy problems or hygienic problems. So again, a low grout joint is actually a bad thing. In the TC&A handbook, it actually specifies where grout joints should sit with certain types of edges or profiles on tiles. So how do we prevent this? Make sure joints are packed full at time of grouting. So again, we want to make sure it's packed fully. We want to make sure we're getting that speed bump and we're not washing too much out. We want to use the appropriate grout float. There's different types of grout floats. There's the gum rubbers, there's the urethane floats, the hard rubber floats. We just want to make sure we're using the right float for the right tile application or grout application. Want to mix the grout to manufacturer's instructions, carefully measuring water and mixing at low speeds. If we overwater that grout, as it dries and cures, it's overwatered, it's going to shrink, and now we're going to have a low grout joint. So we want to make sure we are following those instructions. So we want to wait to the manufacturer's recommendation time to clean grout. If we get on it too soon, what's going to end up happening? We're going to end up pulling that grout right out of the joints. We're going to end up not doing or not serving the purpose of the grout to where we pull the joints out. We end up maybe washing the color out of it. We get spotted colors, but we just want to make sure that it is not too soon. We're not using too much grout or water to clean up that grout. Pinholes. We see this every once in a while. It's still something that's out there. Pinholes, tiny holes that appear in grout joints when grout is fully cured. So prevention. How do you prevent pinholes from happening? Well, I've got one on here that's not in here, but one of the things I've seen a lot of cases is they'll take their sponge and they go to tool and clean the grout joint, and they're doing it aggressively. They're doing the wax on, wax off extremely fast, agitating that grout. We want to do it nice, slow cleaning, circular motions when we're tooling and cleaning those grouts. But prevention in here, do not use high-speed mixers. We don't want to use a high-speed mixer because we don't want to mix too much air entrapment or create air entrapment inside that grout prior to us using it, because what happens is we mix it, we get air entrapment in the bucket, we put it out on the floor, we smear it in. Some of those air pockets are going to be below, which is really indicative to the picture that you see right here, and they're going to pop, or as it starts to cure and shrink, you're going to end up with pinholes as you see in the picture there. Again, we want to make sure the grouts are fully packed grout joints. We want to mix to the grout manufacturer's instructions, carefully measuring water. I'm always going to say that. Always measure water with grouts, mixing at low speeds. Wait the manufacturer's recommended time to clean the grout. Don't get on it too soon. And then do not clean tool grout with excessive amounts of water. We want to make sure, again, that dry wet sponge, we're using as minimal or as little as water as possible to clean these joints. So grouting tips. I got just a couple here that we're going to go through with our grouting tips. For hot weather grouting, we tend to run into hot weather grouting more and more these days. And this really goes for a lot of the guys in the States that are south in the country, the Arizonas, the Californias, the Texas, but hot weather grouting tips. Hot weather grouting can be difficult. These tips can help with having a successful installation. Store grout away from direct sun and away from the heat. Don't keep it in your van sitting out in the 107-degree weather in Phoenix. Don't leave it in the back of your pickup truck, just absorbing the sun's heat, because what's going to happen is you'll take that hot bag, put it in cold water, or put it in room temperature water, and it's going to flash on you, and it's going to go off too quick. You'll be lucky if you get it out of the bucket. So we want to store it away from direct sunlight, preferably in a shaded area or an air-conditioned area. We want to use cold water when mixing. So when you're mixing this using cold water, we've done some tests where you can actually take your water, put it in a gallon of water or whatever amount of water into an ice bucket, cool that water down if you're in an area that is super hot. When you use that cold water, it will extend your pot life, your workability, as well as how long it takes before you need to clean up. So that cold water when mixing really extends all of the attributes before you need to get on it and clean it. Keep mixed grout keep mixed grout bucket cool. So I've seen a guy recently where they actually they mix up their grout with cold water, and then they have a larger vessel that they have filled with ice and water that they actually throw it inside there. It's on wheels, and they roll it around their job, pulling the grout out of it. And it's keeping that grout cool still, even after it's been mixed. So keeping that grout cool in the bucket is another way to extend that working time with it. Pre-wash wet tile surface to cool tile surfaces. Take a damp sponge, cold water, just wipe off that surface. You don't want to pull it in the joints, but just wipe it off to cool that surface down, so that way you don't get that initial hot flash when you start to apply your grout. Try to work in the mornings or evenings. Try to stay out of that direct sunlight if you are, for example, with this guy in the picture, he's in an empty pool. Mornings or evenings. You can retemper the grout without adding water. For most cases, you can retemper the grout one time. Retemper, if you're not familiar with that word, is just remixing the grout. You don't want to add water to it. You just want to throw your mixer in there, remix it, kind of take away that false set or that set that it started to do one time, and that's going to extend that time for you, extend that working time for you. So great hot weather trips. I've used them some myself over the last couple of years, and it really makes a difference in that hot weather application. So efflorescence mitigation system. How do you avoid efflorescence? What's a way to do that? So with efflorescence mitigations we're looking at keeping the efflorescence from moving through that entire system all the way up through the grout joints, leaving efflorescence on top. So how do we do that? We can use membranes such as an uncoupling mat, which is going to actually reduce or prevent efflorescence from transferring through the mortar up through the grout joints. Liquid applied membranes can do that. Drainage mats and moisture mitigation systems. So those are types of ways to prevent that moisture from carrying through that installation if you've got a high RH or a moisturator slab from pushing all that alkali kind of high pH products through. Rapid setting mortars can do that as well. So if you've got those fountains or submerged areas or areas where you need to either submerge it in water or in an area where it's the high RH or high moisture levels in it, a rapid setting mortar can do that. Also too, within that, as the last bullet point, you can see the high performance grouts, the ANSI 118.7 grouts. They help resist efflorescence. They're in some cases not going to stop it, but they're going to help resist it to where it's going to be very minimal. So again, these are basically some tips on efflorescence mitigation. So solutions for success. That's what we want. We want success. We're looking for solutions. Hopefully that's why we're here today. What are these solutions for success? Always follow manufacturer's instructions. So important to follow the manufacturer's instructions for these, because everybody's grouts do perform a little differently. We talked earlier about familiarity with grouts, but they do perform it. They are grouts, but they do perform a little differently, some faster, some slower. But we want to follow those instructions for not only mixing, but also for cleaning. We want to dry mix the grout. When it comes to dry mixing grout, we as manufacturers always recommend mixing the entire bag of grout if it is a cementitious product. So there's a reason for that. And the reason is I always use the Kellogg Frosted Flakes as an example. When you get to the bottom of it, what's in the bottom? All the good stuff, the sugary sweetness of that cereal. Well, if you take a grout from manufacturing, lay it on its side, and it goes across the country, forklifts, back of a truck to a grout job site, contractor picks it up, tears the top off, pours in half of it, mixes it up. What's he missing? He's missing all the good stuff in the bottom of the cereal box. So we want to make sure that we dry mix these. If you are going to use a partial bag, take the bag, roll it around at the very least, end over end, side over side, to try to remix those pigments and get all those different size pigments mixed well within each other. Measure water for mixing. We've mentioned it again and again and again. We want to measure the water for mixing. Measure, measure, measure. I can't say it enough. Mix entire bag of grout. We just spoke about that. Use cool to cold water for mixing. We use that cool to cold water. It extends our working time with this product. Make sure joints are clean and free of mortar. At least it's supposed to be 2/3. I apologize for that. 2/3 thickness of the tile available for grout. So we want 2/3 of the thickness of that available to be able to accept that grout into the joints. We don't want the highs and lows of the mortar inside there. Clean it out, make sure it's nice and even. Fill joints according to the tile edge profile. If you look at my little pictures there on the bottom right, as you can see, kind of a rectified tile where that grout joint's nice and high, and then you've got a cushion edge tile where it sits just below that cushion edge, kind of where that cushion edge glaze ends into the bisque. We want those grouts filled at the appropriate size or thickness or profile of the tile. Wait the appropriate amount of time to clean the tool joints. We want to make sure we're not getting on it too soon, that we're going to be pulling it out of the grout joints. Use as little water as possible. There it is again. Little water as possible when you're working with grouts, especially Portland cement-based grouts. Use the right grout for the right installation. So just because the color is the right grout we want to work for that tile, we want to make sure we're qualifying that grout for what that grout's going to be subject to in the future. Kitchens, heavy commercial, light commercial, chemicals, any of those. So we want to make sure that grout's being used in the right application. Then of course, as always, follow EJ 171 for proper movement joints. That is extremely important, making sure those movement joints are followed. They're there for a reason. They're in the handbook for a reason. And the reason we touch on them so much is because the importance of them. Perimeter soft joints, expansion joints, saw cuts, all of those things, telegraphing or going through your installation. We want to make sure we're honoring those and then we have success. We don't want callbacks. We want to avoid that. So with that being said, my final thoughts. Who knew that something so non-assuming as grout could be such a nemesis? If you go into every grout job with the know-how and the right choice in grout, you can eliminate an enormous number of issues. With proper surface preparation, installation techniques, and proper maintenance, your grout will not crack under pressure, will stay in place, will not pop with excitement, turn white with fear, or crumble with joy. So I hope everybody got some good information out of this. We're sticking around for some questions to be able to answer any questions that y'all may have. But first and foremost, thank you for your time.
Brett, let me thank you. It's amazing. Some of the simplest things in our industry for tile contractors are troweling and grouting, and they probably are simple changes in their approach to make it an easier, better situation. Great job. I want to, you mentioned many times manufacturer's recommendations, and I want to say this to everyone. Manufacturer's recommendations are the recommendations you follow. We all preach methods and standards of our industry, but the final say is the manufacturer's recommendations because they're standing behind it. Read the directions on the back of a bag or a bucket or a can or whatever it is, but those are really the directions on doing it right and making it simple for yourself. So please do that. Brett, we do have a bunch of questions, and and here we go. So Ike says he uses pre-mixed grout in shower applications, but keeps running into grout haze issues. What is the best procedure to clean up the grout so the haze is removed completely?
This was with ready-to-use grouts?
That's what he says. Yep, pre-mixed.
So with ready-to-use grouts, if you look at the manufacturer's instructions, a lot of times they're going to tell you to grout a little bit of an area, let's say 20 square foot, 30 square foot of an area prior to cleaning it out or getting on and moving forward. So they're going to grout 20 to 30 square feet, come back, clean that area, then move to the next section. Because a lot of times with the urethanes, that haze that you're getting could be the acrylics actually drying on top of the surface. It might take a little doodle bug to break those loose. magic erasers can do it. So it's just one of those things where it's don't extend yourself. Do the right amount or a smaller amount, come back, clean it up before it starts to dry on top of the tile, and then move on to the next section.
Excellent. All right. George, this is from George. If the installer pulls too much grout when cleaning and leaves exposed tile edges, how do you repair the grout level?
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Most people are going to say, well, if it's deep enough, just go right over it, mix up some fresh grout and go right over it. I'm not going to recommend that. I'm going to recommend that if you've got some areas where you did wash out too much, that you're going to actually remove the grout joint back down to that minimum of 2/3 of the thickness of tile and regrout that section.
I agree 100% on that. George, I also say that in that situation, there is a chance you'll have some color difference depending, trying to match the same mixture. So if you always mix your grouts to the recommendations of that manufacturer, more than likely you'll have the same color grout using the same batch. So I would take it all out and then replace it. So yeah. Not all, just in that area.
I will say though, most of its manufacturers also do make grout colorants. Professional grade grout colorants. So you can repair an area, but then, as Jim just said, you may not have, even though it might be the same dial out of the same bag, but weather dependent or ambient temperatures, if you grout one day and it's 70 degrees outside, you grout the next day and it's 95 and humid, that grout, even though it's the same dial, could be a different color. So we do make grout colorants that where you can repair those areas, then end up doing a grout colorant over the top of the entire installation without having to grout the entire installation.
And it's not hard.
No.
It sounds hard, but it is very easy to do, and it comes out beautiful. So yep. Yeah, great work. All right, this one comes from John. What's the maximum depth that an ANSI A118.7 high performance grout can be used?
Maximum depth?
Correct.
Of the grout joint?
Yep.
So really it's asking is what's the maximum thickness of a tile that can be used?
Same question, really.
I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you and say I don't know the answer to that question.
I know. Here's what we'll do. John, if tomorrow you'll get an email from me. Reply to that email with this question, and then Brett and I will do a little research and see if we can get you an answer. All right? All right, next. All right. Well, Sharon, I'm sorry, she had to check out a couple minutes early, and she wanted to say thank you, so that was good. All right, we've got great information on the new A118.19 grout standard. He says, I may have missed this. Are there RTU grouts suitable for a wet area such as a shower?
So again, that goes back to different manufacturers. I can speak on my own and say our Ultima can be used in showers. It's called intermittent water. So we can use this on shower walls and we can use them on shower floors in ours because it is not submersed.
All right.
Now I will say the one thing that we do want to stay away from, and I actually just, some manufacturers of tile aren't going to recommend this, is pebbles on tile floors. Pebble stone. Pebble stones tend to create valleys and voids in areas where you're going to get water buildup or water sitting there. They just don't drain effectively as a flat surface would.
That I agree with. All right, we have a comment here. It's thank you for this presentation from Angelica. Appreciate that. The next one is when grouting a stone or more porous tile, how do you recommend you clean the leftover residue?
If it's a porous tile or a stone, I'm always going to recommend a grout release on top. There's many manufacturers. Yep, there's many manufacturers that have grout release. I've done it with quarry tile, abrasive quarry tile, slate, limestone, travertine, any of those porous products or have some type of clefting or texture to the surface that has porosity. A grout release will make your life so much better.
All right, Brett, as always, fantastic presentation. Just want to thank all of our attendants for showing up today. I want everyone to know our next webinar will be June 6th. And please look for your invite either May 31st or June 5th. They'll be coming out, and hope to see all of you. Brett, thank you. Until next time, take care. See all of you. Take care.
Thank you very much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.